Today we're on question number 5 in our 10 defining questions series. And it's a great opportunity. Maybe you're in transition or you're just sort of redefining some purpose in your life. These questions are a great place to start, and they're 10 questions that God asked different people in the Bible. Today our question comes from 2 Kings 4. And verse 1 says, "One day the widow of a member of the group of prophets came to Elisha and cried out, 'My husband who served you is dead, and you know how he feared the Lord, but now a creditor has come, threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves. What can I do to help you?' Elisha asked. 'Tell me, what do you have in your house?'" This is our 5th defining question. What do you have in your house? The last question, what do you have in your hand, was about your skill set, your abilities. This question asks something a little different. It asks, what resources are available to you? What relationships do you have available at your disposal? Now you can tell this widow didn't think very much of what she had, because her answer in verse 2 was, "I don't have anything at all except a flask of olive oil," she replied. Now you may not think very much of the resources that are in your house either, but just like this lady, God will often use the resources you already have to provide the path to your destiny. Let's look at 3 principles we can use from the rest of this widow's story. First of all, the first principle, no matter how little you may think you have, the first principle for this lady was to start pouring. The oil didn't actually begin to multiply until she started pouring. Verse 3, Elisha said, "Borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and neighbors. Then go into your house with your sons and shut the door behind you. Pour olive oil from your flask into the jars, setting each one aside when it is full." Now think how ridiculous this seemed. She went all over the neighborhood borrowing jars that she didn't need yet. She didn't have one more drop of oil at this point than she had when she met Elisha. It would have been so much easier if Elisha would have gone ahead and started multiplying the oil a little at least, wouldn't it? The second principle, not only start pouring even though you may not have much, but keep pouring. Because when the containers were gone, the oil stopped flowing. Verse 5 says, "So she did as she was told. Her sons kept bringing jars to her, and she filled one after another. Soon every container was full to the brim. 'Bring me another jar,' she said to one of her sons. 'There aren't any more,' he told her. And then the oil stopped flowing. As long as she was pouring, the oil was flowing. And God has promised to give seed to the sower in Corinthians. So God's resources are given to us in response to our willingness to use them for His purpose. Just a question, hypothetically, what do you think would have happened if there had been one more jar? Do you think the oil would have stopped? What about if there had been 10 more? I just wonder, would God have ever left one jar empty? As long as there was an outlet, as long as there was a jar to fill, this woman's oil continued to flow. I think the same thing is true in our lives. Sometimes we start pouring, and then we have to, as the Lord blesses that a little, it's easy to kind of think, well, I better hang on to what I've got. But the second principle is keep pouring. And then the third principle is use what you have. Now, the widow didn't actually ask Elisha for oil, did she? She asked for money. Yet Elisha used what she already had in her house to meet her need. Verse 7 said, when she told the man of God what had happened, and what had happened was she had borrowed all of these vessels, and they were all now full of oil, Elisha said, "Now sell the olive oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on what's left over." Think how ridiculous one flask of oil looked to a lady who was about to lose everything because of her debt. Yet God started right there with the little bit she already had to fix her big problem. God didn't begin multiplying until she began pouring. God didn't stop multiplying until she stopped pouring. And God used what she already had in her house to meet her need. Maybe you only have a little money to meet your need. Start pouring. Maybe you only have a little influence with which to make a difference. Start pouring. And maybe you only have a little time to work out a solution. Start pouring. Pouring what? What do you have in your house?